Oh my goodness. I say it before, and I will say it again. It's not been a good week for McLaren, has it? And it might just get worse since Max Verstappen's actual target will be second place. That might sound anticlimactic to you. After all, Max has spent years trying to redefine what domination actually looks like in this day and age. But I don't think this is about pride or anything like that, because I think if Max can at least overtake one of the McLaren drivers, or at least give both of them food for thought with them getting that clean sweep, it could do enough reputational damage to redefine what the narrative will be going into 2026, especially since technical director Pierre Vacher recently said that what the Red Bull Powertrains project has been outputting lately is looking promising, which is going to throw yet another one of these in the works, as in, we ain't got a clue as to who's actually the fastest. And quite frankly, I love it. And I can easily understand you might be thinking, well, I'm only saying this because I rate my boy so highly. Well, that's not it. I've always been keen to give Max credit when it's due, and we're really looking likely to not have that scripted run into Abu Dhabi that we were all fearing, perhaps getting something far more unpredictable. As McLaren boss Andrea Stella keeps stressing to us all, Max is now a genuine threat to their title hopes, and they know it. All the while, they are very much trying to re-establish the trust process with both drivers. And when I say both drivers, I mean with Oscar Piastri's camp. And even then, that just goes to show that Verstappen's influence is already having an impact in Woking. That him just being there and finishing ahead of both drivers, yet again, slowly but surely creeping in, is going to test Papaya rules to the limit. And that is before all of the stuff that's going down in the legal system between Alex Palou and Zach Brown. Now, I'm not going to go into the full details of that because it is an ongoing investigation. But all of the stuff that's been laid bare to us via the likes of Motorsport magazine, and you're just thinking, this couldn't have happened at a worse time. I mean, this coming after the Singapore Grand Prix, the damage control that we've seen from McLaren going as far as when they're bringing the box containing the Constructors' Trophy, they make a very clear point that it's Andrea Stella and Oscar Piastri holding the box, with Lando walking right behind them. The clip is actually on their Instagram page. Then both drivers hold the trophy aloft, as in, hey, we acknowledge Oscar's achievements in this. But what's been going on with Brown, it's only added to perceptions of imbalance inside the team. And what makes it even more tragic is that this was something that McLaren filed. And then when you take a look at what's being alleged by the Palou camp, you think, oh, maybe my boy wasn't valued as much by McLaren after all, or at least not in the eyes of Brown. I mean, again, this is all allegations, these are claims, these have not been finalised in the court of law. It's something that will play out. There are places out there, periodicals, what have you, that are covering this as it goes along, so I will leave it to them until it's all been laid bare and the verdict has been reached. But nevertheless, this is really changing McLaren's perception amongst the wider Formula One fandom in a negative way, and it's only going to damage what Lando Norris has as a structure around him going into the final 6 weekends. And also, inside a team and out of it, perception in Formula One is everything. Once it turns toxic, morale will decay rapidly, trapped between, as McLaren wish to portray all the time, two golden boys. And that is not good news for one of them. With the team having to undertake a massive social media campaign to redress the balance against claims that they are not favouring Oscar Piastri, and they are actually giving both drivers the right opportunity. But what got my attention quite a lot recently was a comment made by Zach Brown's own idol, the former champion who has rocked Laguna Seca in McLaren cars recently, and considers the CEO of the team to be a good friend, 1978 champ Mario Andretti. He was speaking at an Italian event, and the article came from La Gazzetta dello Sport. And usually, Italian press has a dubious reputation in terms of, pontificating various things. But no, this was a quote from Andretti, and I will share it with you for your consideration. And this is not the only time when you be thinking, wait a minute. Verstappen is very strong. I like Piastri for his grit. But it seems to me that at McLaren, for some reason, I don't know why, they favour Lando Norris. I'm a big fan of Leclerc. If he really wanted to change teams one day, I'd take him to Cadillac straight away. Ferrari is Ferrari, and sooner or later, it will come back, always. Now, I mean, just right there, the Verstappen thing, yeah, everyone says that. But Leclerc, he would take him into Cadillac if he could, Oh, that's a new story in of itself. But we'll talk about that maybe in another video. But right now, that McLaren take is pretty damning. But I must make it clear, he's not stating a fact or anything like that. He's making it very clear that this is a take of his, but it is a pretty spicy one, given who he is. A world champion, close to Zach, one of his public heroes even. And when someone in that circle says McLaren seemed to favour Norris, it lands differently than it came from an ordinary pundit. It suggests the perception of bias has crept into even the sport's inner circles, that this is becoming a popular topic amongst the paddock and former champions, especially maybe amongst people who might have benefited from certain examples of favouritism over the years. Maybe sort of a thing that is along the lines of the old phrase, takes one to know one. And considering that Mario Andretti might be a little bit more frequent around the Formula One paddock, now he's going to be wearing a Cadillac cap, repping the team as one of the boardroom members and a major talent scout for drivers, and he's got his eye on current drivers. He's looking at the driver market for anybody who might want to succeed Valtteri Bottas or Checo, should they wish to call time on their Formula One careers for good in the next few years, depends on how long they want to be there. He is keeping an eye on who is staying or who might be going. So even though the Andretti name is also involved in other sports, Mario will probably be a very important figure that Cadillac will want to wheel out. And then when you couple his takes with what Alain Prost said at the Goodwood Festival of Speed regarding Oscar, rating him incredibly highly, thinking that Alpine really dropped a ball with that one and that McLaren got a good egg in their area, then what's going on in that particular case about the value of Oscar being made a little more dubious than before. And then what Lewis Hamilton said about Oscar, giving indirect advice, saying, don't give up any places, that's all I would say. You do feel like amongst world champions, Piastri has gained their respect. And again, perception is everything in Formula One. And if the perception is against you or feel like there is something off within a team, that can be dangerous in of itself. It becomes self-sustaining. It just becomes unstoppable. That no matter what happens, no matter what McLaren tries to do, it's now out of the box. It's now its own thing. And eventually, it is going to impact the team negatively, and, much to Brown's potential chagrin, sponsors may start calling. But come on, Law, is what Andretti really said that damaging? Honestly? Well, okay, it's not the killer blow that McLaren really did not want to see, but it is quite damaging in its own way. It validates an existing storyline via a veteran. Because Andretti, though, frames it as an impression rather than an accusation, McLaren could easily brush this off as just yet another opinion. Noise, as has been so often used to describe chatter from pundits in recent times. Most recent example being Lance Stroll. But the risk is there, though, in a reputational way rather than in a regulatory way. If you're wondering whether or not the FIA will actually take a look at this and hand down some kind of punishment, justice for Oscar or what have you, I hate to burst your bubble, but I'm afraid that is not going to happen. So yeah, I'm just going to have to get the foam out of this one. I really don't think anything's dodgy in regards to anything involved with the FIA or the Contract Recognition Board, unless more information comes to light regarding this court case and the FIA do want to take a look at it. But I must really make it clear, this is only a bit of musing, suppositions, not quite speculation, but McLaren aren't in any hot water with the FIA. Regardless, this is a narrative that will only continue for the next few races especially, definitely in Austin. Strategy calls as well as messages that will get played out on the world feed. Everyone will be looking through them consistently and meticulously. If any future call looks even remotely slated in Norris's favour, this quote from Andretti could be drudged up again, and people might go, see? Even Mario, Zach's bestie, saw it coming. So yeah, the power of this quote is very symbolic, even if it is just an opinion. Because I think this is just yet another example that even really storied people within Formula One's history of 75 years are now going to be watching McLaren like a hawk. They're going, I'm watching you. You bet not do anything funny to either driver. Let them actually race, or it's only going to get worse and no kind of damage control will be done. There will be no stopping of this particular train. Any deviation from the original Papyrus template laid out by Piastri or what was told to him as simply not crashing into each other, which this year Lando has flouted twice, that is going to be very much flagged, and people are going, aha! Because yes, as we have seen with every single example of papaya rules being tested, it's only gotten that little bit more complicated. And this will all play into the hands of one Max Verstappen, because I don't think you need me to tell you. By really exhibiting the idea of fairness, equality, papaya rules, McLaren have made a public relations rod for their own back, and they're being constantly battered by it by anyone who actually took a look at what's been said in the past and going, hey, as well as all of the stuff that we've heard from the public hearing. But again, these are all allegations as of this time, but in some people's minds, in some fans' minds, that's all they need to hear. Confirmation bias is running rampant. As you can imagine, the symbols which the Woking team have used to highlight their imagery of fairness have gotten incredibly convoluted and muddy, a far cry from how Verstappen himself would behave. He and Red Bull lately have just been getting their heads down and finding technical gains to close in on Ferrari and Mercedes, providing their Dutchmen at least a little bit of fun in the final few races of this year, with sites like The Race showcasing advances in flexi-wing development in particular, which Mecky's and Wolf's squads have been modifying within the existing rules, with The Race then going on to imply that Ferrari have not only dropped the ball in regards to flexi-wing technology, they've just completely lost it, that things have stagnated. That after Technical Directive 18, Ferrari decided not to pursue anything in that element and focus on other things, believing that the flexi-wing concept was dead in the water. Not so regarding Allison and Vache. There were still more gains to be had, and look where Mercedes is right now. Look where Red Bull is right now. They are very much on the back of McLaren, or in some cases beating them. Russell and Antonelli improving, Verstappen improving, Tsunoda getting there. But Russell and Verstappen are proving to be a major thorn in Norris's back, and it might mean that no amount of papaya rules can actually save his bacon, and it might make the job of Piastri's that little bit easier, so long as he doesn't have the end-of-season slump that we saw in 2024 from the Australian. One mistake after another. As a Piastri fan, for my boy, it was brutal. Track limits especially. And then Dutch pundit Robert Doornbos says that Max will remember the Singapore qualifying tangle in particular with Lando. Even though it could be misconstrued as accidental, Verstappen is fired up, saying that he might return the favour that it was noted and remembered, even if he hadn't demonstrated it already with his defensive work around the race itself, denying Lando any opportunity to pass him. And that is the kind of small scar that can easily grow into a full-blown rivalry and a dissolution of their friendship outside the track. However, Robert Doornbos does go on to put in his own little foam of doubt, saying that he has observed that Max and Lando have historically been rather good in keeping their work and home life separate from one another. That if things get frosty at the track, they can easily just continue on with their friendship in Monte Carlo away from the cameras, or at least most of them. They can actually go out and socialise. Whereas now, something does feel a little off, and you only have to see this between the differences in the post-qualifying feed and the post-race interviews. That as they were not being talked to, and George was blimey waxing lyrical about how he got pole and then the win, the overall vibe between the two McLaren drivers were really, really different. Between Max and Lando, there was a lot of just looking at the floor, just not looking at each other, just waiting for their turn and not really interacting with one another. And then when you look at what happened between Piastri and Verstappen, it was all jokey. And the whole banter about not Oscar sort of thing, as in Max was making a very pointed saying, hey, I've got nothing wrong with my boy here. It was a not Oscar, as in there was banter at Lando's expense. And that maybe he, Max, sees the British driver as his target, perhaps. And no, this is not me being anti-British bias or anything. This is a mathematical fact, since he is closer to Norris in the championship than he is to Piastri. And whilst I appreciate Lando Norris's rebuttals regarding Verstappen questions posed by the media, him actually employing sarcasm saying, oh no, I'm really, really scared, yet no. The prevailing winds are supposing that attention is on him and his team for all the wrong reasons. Because now everyone's thinking, congratulations McLaren, you've won the Constructors. You are now in double figures. The only other team who is in double figures is Scuderia Ferrari. Yes, you might have to win 7 more Constructors to actually surpass them, but hey, you've overtaken Williams. Well, bravo, McLaren. So can you now just focus on the Drivers' Championship and make sure that the best man actually wins? There's a little less justification in taking overall risk management, which could easily see the team being embarrassed with them not winning the Constructors, as Red Bull experienced for themselves last year when they were leading the Constructors and then fell down to 3rd. And there is more justification in the pit wall just taking their hands off the wheel, for real this time, and just doing nothing except making sure that neither driver crash into one another. Again, may I remind you, Lando has actually collided with Piastri twice, whereas Oscar has been getting wrapped knuckles for just dive bombing and not actually making contact, notably in Austria and in Hungary. It all really depends on whether Verstappen was just fired up and angry, the adrenaline coursing through his veins when he said, "Oh, I'll make sure I remember that," and whether or not he's actually calmed down, he's just gotten over it, he'll be going into Austin just thinking on a race-by-race basis once again. Or maybe he was just really mad in the moment that what he supposed Lando did denied him the opportunity of getting pole position around Marina Bay, and then maybe potentially dictating the race pace and winning that Grand Prix for the first time, and maybe getting 7 more championship points to get him even closer to Norris, and then just under the 60-point barrier toward Piastri. And that would then mean that one DNF from either of the McLaren drivers would bring him right back in there again, especially if it were Oscar. Or potentially Max is acting like some kind of zookeeper, and we are all just a bunch of hungry penguins clamoring for our fish, and Max is in that superior position where he has that bucket of fish and just goes, "Here you go, have at it, there you go, now leave me alone." But that in turn does actually raise Lando Norris's stock in some way, shape or form, that Verstappen does acknowledge Lando's presence and views him as a championship contender in some way, shape or form, be it simply mathematical. Because regardless of whether it's seen as something that he hard fought for or whether it was by design by McLaren themselves, Norris is in the championship hunt, being only 22 points behind Piastri. And it means if Piastri were to DNF in Austin and Lando went on to win the Grand Prix, he would be ahead. And yes, indeed, a DNF from either of them will only turn the volume up on this even more, and Verstappen will then keep on turning it again and again and again, and then either one of those drivers will crumble. I'm not saying that Lando is a guarantor to crumble. Oscar can easily show cracks as well. This that both drivers, especially Lando, will have to endure, but in a different way. For Oscar, this is brand new territory, and in a way, for Lando, the roles have been reversed. Yeah, they're both being hunted by one of the most tenacious and calculated drivers on the grid right now, and in a car which is rapidly catching up. But for Norris, this might be especially galling, as maybe some of the lessons he learnt last year may not apply here in this framework, since he is not the hunter. Max is the hunter. For Lando, this is an identity test as much as a sporting one. He's always been seen as McLaren's face, the constant since they rebuilt after 2018's rather barren-looking season and car. But when that constancy turns into expectation, the pressure could continue to mutate. Lando, quite frankly, cannot afford to blink anymore, whereas Piastri has a little bit more room to experiment. Yes, of course, there is very much many eyes on the Australian, people thinking that, oh, can he actually convert in his 3rd season? But if he fails to do it, he has youth and relative inexperience behind him to say, well, he gave it a go, maybe he'll try better next year, or maybe he might go to another team and we'll see a completely different stance for him. Whereas unfortunately with Norris, he is now typecast. There have been many examples of him being touted to go to maybe Mercedes, Ferrari, Red Bull, but unfortunately, given all of the stuff that has happened recently, I think Lando is destined to be either at McLaren or not in Formula 1 anymore. And given the fact there is going to be much more scrutiny, many more eyes are going to be trained toward McLaren, be what they do on the track or off the track or on the pit wall, that whatever might happen in trying to get Norris to convert, it's going to have to come down to him. That there can't be any operational interferences coming his way. Or they might have to get a little bit more crafty in which to try and get the narrative into what they supposedly want, the way that Andretti sees it. And that, if they resorted to it, could get them in trouble with the FIA. Again, this is all speculation right now, I'm making this absolutely clear, but this is just me saying that if Lando wants to go and win this title, he can do it. I predicted that he would do so at the beginning of the year. He now has to go and do it for himself. He is going to have to dig deep and pray that the tapering off that Piastri had last year happens again. But one thing that goes in Lando's favour that he has said throughout the year and before is that he wants to win a title fairly, in equal machinery. He does not want team orders handing it to him. Likewise, Oscar has been quite gracious with pitwall calls, reluctantly as of now, as long as he was in the understanding that he and Lando were given the same basic car, bar some driver-specific tweaks for their own comfort. It all comes down to parity and clarity, and if either element of those two phrases actually gets muddied or becomes completely null and void, that's when you're going to get friction. You're going to get friction from Lando thinking that, well, hey, I may have won the title, but nobody rates this because this wasn't won fairly. This is not going against by my own original principles, even if it was gifted to me by the higher-ups. And as for Oscar, he's been saying, hey, as long as you give me parity and you make it clear that we have the same car, I'm good. Because that is one thing that is going in McLaren's favour. Nobody is doubting the equality of the McLaren cars themselves, the hardware. No, it's down to the people on the garage. That is where everyone's got some question marks, especially in regards to actions being undertaken or actions not being undertaken. And then you get all the stuff that's being said in the Palou Brown investigation. Again, this is just yet another own goal that suggests that maybe Piastri was not the driver of choice that was said in 2022 amidst that infamous tweet. And that maybe Oscar Piastri was the decision of not Zak Brown, but Andrea Seidel, who then got shipped out of McLaren, deciding to go over to Alfa Romeo and then lead the Audi project. All of this then casting new foams of doubt regarding the nature of Andreas Seidel's retirement. Because I did rate Andreas very well in 2019. He did a great job in changing the perception of McLaren into being the very valiant underdogs. And then, after the first wobble in 2022, he was gone. He was absolutely gone. And then McLaren changed, and it was just, yeah, I've got the foam up for this one. I mean, this could easily be a psychological blow for Oscar as well, but I would like to think he's made of harder stuff and he's got the right support network behind him. But remember, the Palou Brown thing is ongoing. So in closing, Andretti's quote is not a smoking gun. It's not the aha moment, but I think it does do something sharper, which will sting McLaren's public image a little bit more. It paints a target on their pit wall. It limits what they can actually do without being seen as biased in either direction. And Max will use that to the fullest extent. He will exploit that. Red Bull will exploit that. Something which has not been lost on Stella though, but it might get lost amidst all of the different power brokers within the team. Verstappen, and even Russell if the W16 proves to be consistently tracking upwards, will force choices at the worst possible moment. You won't be hearing any more of the whole box to cover Leclerc, it will be more and more box to cover Verstappen. And Max, oh, he's going to love this. He is going to be sitting in the mirrors of the two McLaren drivers. He will make sure to push either driver into a mistake, potentially more so with Lando, and then George, oh, he'll be glad to pick up the pieces to gain a couple of more Grand Prix wins, taking points away from Lando, and limiting the damage sustained by Piastri if he did finish behind Lando, but then equally could easily limit what points he can gain over Lando. But basically, the clean image of McLaren having the clean sweep uncontested, that's out the window now, from now Mercedes as well as Red Bull. And that Russell and Verstappen will now make any decision from McLaren looking either based on favoritism or just an abject failure. Heck, why not? Maybe Kimi Antonelli might get in the game as well after his little kick in the butt now gave him consecutive top 5 finishes. Him actually being able to soon surpass Oscar Piastri's rookie year tally and then break the 100-point barrier, which in of itself is no mean feat for the young Italian Verstappen. I mean, come on. He had a really rough European leg, but there is life in Kimi yet. But this puts the onus on Norris himself to do damage control on his part, to starve oxygen from this particular narrative that the team is favouring him. He really needs to go on the offensive to say that there is nothing wrong with McLaren. Me and Oscar are being given equal treatment, and I will do my best to make sure that that is the case. I do not want handouts. Oscar does not want handouts. We want to win this championship fair and square, or else it will be tainted. And even though the public consciousness is actually in Piastri's favour, I don't think he can rest easy on this, because he still has to go out there and defend his championship lead, it being whittled down in many races since his win at the Dutch Grand Prix. And if there is any crack in the seams of either Piastri's garage or Norris's garage, Max and George will pry it open and gorge on the contents. Like how you should gorge on the contents of this video here, which I and YouTube think you'll really like. I'll see you over there, maybe with a different top.